I was sitting in my small apartment, eating leftover Chinese food and trying not to think about my father's funeral 3 days ago, when my phone buzzed. A text from Tyler, my oldest stepbrother. Thanks for making Dad's life easier by staying away these last few years. Made the inheritance split a lot simpler. Below it, a photo. Tyler, Mason, and Blake, my 3 stepbrothers, holding champagne glasses, grinning at the camera. In the background, I could see my stepmother Patricia's living room, the house my father had bought. Another text, this time from Mason, $4 each, not bad for a Tuesday. Maybe we'll send you a care package. You probably need it more than we do. Then Blake. Seriously, though, thanks for not making a fuss. We all know you weren't really Dad's kid anyway. Just some baggage from his first marriage. I'd stared at those texts for a long time, at the laughing emojis, at the casual cruelty, at the celebration of my exclusion from my own father's will. My father, Richard Ashford, dead at 67 from a sudden stroke, gone before I could repair the relationship that Patricia had spent 15 years destroying. And apparently, he'd left me nothing. Left everything to Patricia and her 3 sons, the family he'd chosen over me, his biological daughter. I'd been sitting there, feeling that familiar mix of grief and rage and helplessness when there was a knock at my door. I'd opened it to find a man in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Cassandra Ashford? Yes? My name is Gregory Walsh. I'm an attorney with Morrison, Walsh & Chen. I'm the executor of your father's will, the actual will. May I come in? And that's when everything changed. My name is Cassandra Ashford, 32 years old, graphic designer, daughter of Richard Ashford and his first wife Jennifer, who died when I was 8, stepdaughter to Patricia Ashford, who'd spent 15 years making sure I knew I'd never truly belonged to her family. But as I sat across from Gregory Walsh in my tiny apartment, watching him pull documents from his briefcase, I realized Patricia had made a critical mistake. She'd assumed my father was as cruel as she was. She'd assumed wrong. My father and I had been close once, before Patricia, before everything changed. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe. And hit that hype button to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where you're all watching from. My mother, Jennifer, had died when I was 8 years old. Ovarian cancer, fast and brutal. 6 months from diagnosis to death, and suddenly my world had collapsed. Dad had been destroyed. He'd loved my mother completely. High school sweethearts, married at 22, built a life together. Her death had shattered something in him, but he'd tried so hard to hold it together for me, to be both parents, to make sure I felt loved and safe even though we were both drowning in grief. For 2 years, it had been just us, Dad and Cassie against the world. We'd figured it out together, the cooking, the homework, the bedtime routines, the middle-of-the-night crying sessions when the grief got too heavy. He'd been a commercial real estate developer, successful and busy, but he'd rearranged his life to prioritize me. He'd cut back his hours, hired a nanny for after school, showed up to every school event, read to me every night. We'd been healing, slowly, building a new normal without Mom, and then he'd met Patricia. Patricia Whitmore had been a paralegal at the law firm my father used for his business deals, divorced, 3 young sons, Tyler, 8, Mason, 6, and Blake, 4. Beautiful in a sharp, polished way that was nothing like my mother's warm gentleness. Dad had started dating her about 2.5 years after Mom died. I'd been 10. At first, Patricia had been nice to me, sweet even. She'd complimented my drawings, brought me little gifts, told my father how wonderful I was. I'd been desperate for a mother figure, desperate for family. So I'd fallen for it completely. They'd gotten married when I was 11. Small ceremony, just close family and friends. Patricia's 3 boys had been my new brothers. We were going to be a blended family. Everything was going to be perfect. The mask had come off about 3 months after the wedding. It had started with small things, comments that seemed innocuous at first, but had sharp edges underneath. Cassie, sweetie, maybe you should wear something nicer to dinner. You want to make a good impression, don't you? Cassie, the boys are playing. Why don't you go do your homework? You're a bit too old for their games anyway. Cassie, your father and I are taking the boys to the movies. You understand, right? It's more age-appropriate for them. You can stay with the babysitter. Every comment positioning me as outside, as other, as not quite part of the core family unit. My father, blinded by love or willful ignorance or both, hadn't seen it, or hadn't wanted to see it. Patricia's just trying to help you, Cassie. She cares about you. Patricia's adjusting too. This is hard for everyone. Give her time. Cassie, you're being sensitive. Patricia didn't mean it that way. By the time I was 13, the comments had evolved into rules. Patricia's sons got new clothes every season. I got hand-me-downs from her nieces or clearance rack specials. Patricia's sons got enrolled in sports, music lessons, summer camps. My art classes that Dad had been paying for? Too expensive now that we have 3 more children to support, Cassie. You understand? Patricia's sons got elaborate birthday parties. I got a cake at dinner and maybe one present. It's not favoritism, Patricia had explained when I'd finally worked up the courage to complain to Dad. Tyler, Mason, and Blake are younger. They need more right now. You're old enough to understand that resources have to be distributed fairly. Fairly meant her sons got everything. I got scraps. By 15, I'd learned to stay quiet, to not make waves, to not complain to Dad because it just caused arguments between him and Patricia, and those arguments always ended the same way. Him apologizing to her, and nothing changing for me. Patricia had gotten pregnant when I was 14. A daughter, finally, Emily. She'd been thrilled. A girl of my own, she'd said, right in front of me. When Emily was born, I'd been excited. A baby sister. Maybe this would change things. Maybe Patricia would soften. Instead, it had gotten worse. Cassie, watch Emily while I make dinner. Cassie, Emily needs her diaper changed. Cassie, take Emily for a walk. I need a break. I'd become the free babysitter, the extra parent, the one responsible for Patricia's daughter while getting no credit, no appreciation, and certainly no compensation. At 16, I'd asked Dad if I could get a part-time job. What for? He'd asked. To save money for college, and to have my own money for things I want. Cassie, you should focus on school. I'll pay for college. But when college came, the story changed. Cassie, we need to be realistic, Patricia had said, sitting at the dining room table with financial aid forms spread in front of us. With 4 children to put through college, we can't afford to pay for everything. You'll need to take out loans. Tyler will be starting college in 2 years, and then Mason and Blake and Emily. It's only fair that everyone contributes to their own education. But Dad promised. Your father makes promises he can't keep, Patricia had interrupted. We have financial obligations. You're 18 now, an adult. Time to take responsibility for yourself. I'd taken out $85,000 in student loans for my 4-year degree, worked 2 jobs through college to cover living expenses, graduated with honors in graphic design. Tyler had gone to a private university, fully paid by Dad. No loans, no job, just a free ride. The pattern had been established. What was mine was conditional. What was Patricia's sons was guaranteed. The breaking point had come when I was 23. I'd been working as a graphic designer for 3 years, living in a small apartment, paying down my student loans. I'd stayed in contact with Dad, visiting for holidays, calling weekly. But the visits had gotten harder. Patricia's passive-aggressive comments. The way her sons treated me like an outsider. The way Dad never defended me, just made excuses. That Christmas, Dad had announced he was downsizing from his large development company to a smaller consulting role. Slowing down, he'd said. Spending more time with family. He'd also announced he was putting the boys through graduate school. Tyler was getting an MBA at Harvard, fully funded. Mason was going to law school. Blake was getting a master's in engineering. That's wonderful, I'd said, genuinely happy for them despite everything. I'm glad you can help them avoid the debt I had. Patricia had smiled, sharp as a knife. Well, they're younger than you were, and frankly, Richard and I are in a better financial position now than we were when you went to college. Better late than never, right? That had been a lie. Dad had been wealthy when I'd gone to college. He'd just prioritized Patricia's comfort over my education. After dinner, I'd follow Dad to his study. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Why didn't you pay for my college? You had the money. You just paid for Tyler's entire undergrad at a private school that costs $60,000 a year. You could have done that for me. He'd looked uncomfortable. Cassie, things were different then. Patricia and I were still adjusting financially. Combining households is expensive. You bought her a Mercedes that year. That's different. How? How is buying Patricia a $70,000 car different from paying for my education? How is that different from Tyler getting everything while I got debt? Cassie, you're being unfair. We've helped you. How? How have you helped me? Name one thing in the last 5 years you've done for me that you haven't done 10 times over for Tyler, Mason, and Blake. He'd had no answer. I love you, Dad, I'd said quietly. But I can't keep showing up to be treated like I don't belong in your family. Patricia's made it clear for years that I'm not really part of this. And you've let her. You've chosen her version of family over me. That's not true, Cassie. You're my daughter. Then act like it, I'd said. Defend me. Stand up for me. Tell Patricia she's wrong when she treats me like I'm less than her children. Acknowledge that you've given them everything and me nothing. Do something that shows I matter to you as much as they do." He just looked at me sadly. "It's complicated, Cassie." "It's not complicated, Dad. It's a choice, and you've made yours." I'd left that night and hadn't gone back. 3 Christmases, 3 Thanksgivings, countless family events I'd been invited to out of obligation, but never really included in. I'd talk to Dad on the phone occasionally, brief, surface-level conversations. "How's work? How's your apartment? Are you seeing anyone?" Never anything deep, never addressing the real issues. And then, 2 weeks ago, Patricia had called. "Cassandra, your father had a stroke. You need to come to the hospital." I'd driven 3 hours to the hospital where Dad was in the ICU. The stroke had been massive. The doctors were saying words like brain damage, and if he wakes up, and prepare for the worst. Patricia had been there with Tyler, Mason, and Blake. All of them clustered around Dad's bed like grieving family while I'd stood in the doorway, suddenly unsure if I was even welcome. "Cassie," Dad had whispered when he'd seen me. His speech was slurred, his face drooping on one side. "You came?" "Of course I came," I'd said, moving to his bedside, taking his hand. "I'm here, Dad." "I'm sorry," he'd whispered. "So sorry. Should have done better. Love you, Cassie girl." Cassie girl. His nickname for me from childhood, the one he'd stopped using after Patricia came into our lives. "I love you too, Dad." He'd squeezed my hand weakly. "Will, executor, Gregory Walsh. He has it. The real one." "Dad, don't worry about that now. Just rest." "No. Important. Patricia doesn't have..." His voice had trailed off. His eyes had closed. He'd died 3 hours later without waking up again. Patricia had cried dramatically. The boys had comforted her. They'd made funeral arrangements. They'd organized the service. They'd done everything with the efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were inheriting and wanted to get to it as quickly as possible. I'd been a ghost at my own father's funeral, present but invisible, grieving alone in a crowd of people who'd never really considered me family. After the service, Patricia had pulled me aside. "I know you and Richard had a complicated relationship these last few years," she had said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But I want you to know we appreciate you not making this difficult. Richard left everything to me and the boys, of course. He knew where his priorities were. But we're happy to cover the funeral costs. Consider it our gift to you." She'd patted my arm like I was a pet, like I should be grateful for their generosity in covering my own father's funeral. "You'll never be part of this family, Cassandra," she'd added, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You were Jennifer's daughter. You'll never truly be Richard's. Accept it and move on." I'd left the funeral without another word, driven back to my apartment, tried to process the grief and rage and finality of it all. And then I'd gotten those texts, those mocking, cruel texts celebrating their $12 million inheritance and my exclusion. And then Gregory Walsh had knocked on my door. Gregory Walsh had sat across from me in my tiny living room, his expensive suit looking out of place among my IKEA furniture and clearance art prints. "Ms. Ashford, I need to ask you a few questions before we proceed." "Okay," I'd said, still confused about why he was here. "Did you attend your father's funeral 3 days ago?" "Yes." "Did Patricia Ashford or her sons discuss your father's will with you, mention any inheritance?" I'd hesitated, then shown him the texts. His face had darkened as he'd read them. "I see. And did anyone present you with any legal documents? Anything to sign?" "No. Patricia said Dad left everything to her and the boys." That was it. I didn't question it. "Why not?" "Because it seemed consistent with how things have been for years. Patricia's made it very clear I'm not really part of the family. I figured Dad felt the same way." Gregory had shaken his head slowly. "Ms. Ashford, your father loved you very much, and he was far more aware of his wife's treatment of you than you might think." He'd opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. "This is your father's actual will, executed 6 months ago, properly witnessed and notarized, filed with my firm. I am the named executor. Your father came to me specifically because he didn't trust his wife to handle his estate fairly." My heart had started pounding. "What does it say?" "Before I tell you, you need to understand something. 3 days ago, someone impersonating an executor apparently met with Patricia and her sons and presented them with a fraudulent will. I say apparently because I only learned about this morning when I called Patricia to schedule the official reading and she told me it had already happened." "A fraudulent will?" "Someone pretending to be the executor, with a fake will that left everything to Patricia and her sons. And they believed it, acted on it, and apparently have been celebrating their inheritance. But who would do that? I don't know. But here's what your father's actual will says. He'd handed me the document. I'll summarize the key points, and then you can read it yourself. I'd taken the will with shaking hands. Your father's estate is worth approximately $12.3 million, Gregory had begun. That includes his real estate holdings, investments, retirement accounts, and life insurance. Everything except the house he shared with Patricia, which was jointly owned and automatically transfers to her. I'd nodded, barely breathing. Of that $12.3 million, you, Cassandra Ashford, are to receive $11.5 million. Patricia Ashford receives nothing beyond the house. Tyler, Mason, and Blake Ashford are to split $500,000, approximately $166,000 each. Emily Ashford, being a minor, has $300,000 placed in a trust for her education and care until she turns 25. The room had spun. I'd gripped the edges of the document, reading the words myself to make sure I'd heard correctly. To my daughter, Cassandra Elizabeth Ashford, I leave the sum of $11.5 million and all associated assets, investments, and holdings detailed in Schedule A. This can't be real, I'd whispered. It's very real. And Ms. Ashford, there's more. Your father included a letter. He wanted you to read it before we proceed with anything else. He'd handed me an envelope, sealed, with my name in my father's handwriting. I'd opened it with trembling hands. My dearest Cassie girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry. Sorry for so many things that I can't even begin to list them all, but I'm going to try. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to stand up to Patricia. I'm sorry I let her push you out of our family. I'm sorry I chose a comfortable marriage over my relationship with you. I'm sorry I paid for Tyler's school and not yours. I'm sorry for every time I should have defended you and didn't. I'm sorry for every way I failed you after your mother died. You deserved better. You deserved a father who protected you, who prioritized you, who made sure you knew you were loved and valued and essential. Instead, you got a coward who was so afraid of being alone, so desperate to have a complete family, that he sacrificed his real daughter for the illusion of domestic harmony. I have no excuse. I can't blame grief or loneliness or Patricia's manipulation, though all of those things were real. At the end of the day, I made choices, and my choices hurt you. I want you to know that I saw it. I saw every cruel comment Patricia made, every time she favored her boys over you, every double standard, every exclusion, every way she made you feel like you weren't enough. I saw it, and I was ashamed that I didn't stop it. The older I got, the more clearly I saw what I'd done, how I'd let Patricia rewrite our family with you as the outsider, how I'd participated in your erasure by my silence and inaction. About a year ago, I started making changes. I went to a therapist, something I should have done 20 years ago. I started being honest with myself about my marriage, my choices, and the damage I'd caused, and I started preparing to make things right. This will is my attempt to do that. It's inadequate. No amount of money can make up for lost time, lost relationship, lost trust. But it's what I can give you now. Patricia will fight this. She'll contest the will, claim I was incompetent or manipulated, try to overturn my wishes. That's why I was so careful, had multiple witnesses, had my doctor certify my mental capacity, made sure everything was legally airtight. Gregory Walsh is a good man and an excellent attorney. Trust him. I know you might not want the money. You might feel like accepting it is accepting my pathetic attempt to buy forgiveness. But Cassie, take it anyway. Take it and build the life you deserve. Take it and never wonder if you can afford something. Take it and know that in this one thing, finally, I put you first. And please, if you can, forgive me. Not for my sake. I'll be gone. For yours. Don't carry the weight of our broken relationship forever. You were an amazing daughter. I was a failing father. That was never about your worth. That was always about my weakness. I love you, Cassie girl. I always did, even when I didn't show it. Even when I failed you. Even when I let Patricia convince me that providing for you financially was enough when you needed so much more. You deserved better than me, but you got me anyway. And this will is my final apology. Love always, Dad. I'd cried reading that letter. Deep, wrenching sobs that felt like they were tearing something loose in my chest. Gregory had sat quietly, letting me grieve. He knew, I'd finally managed to say. He knew what Patricia was doing. He knew, Gregory had confirmed. And for what it's worth, Ms. Ashford, he was deeply ashamed. We met regularly over the last 6 months to work on this will. He talked about you constantly, about how proud he was of you, about how much he regretted the distance between you. about how he hoped this would help you understand that despite his failures, he loved you. Why didn't he just tell me? Why didn't he change things while he was alive? I don't know. Fear, maybe. Shame. The weight of years of bad choices making it hard to see a path forward. He talked about planning to have a conversation with you, about wanting to rebuild your relationship. He wanted to finalize the will first, make sure you were protected, and then sit down with you and be honest about everything. But he ran out of time. What happens now? I'd asked after I'd cried myself out and pulled myself together enough to think clearly. Now, we officially probate the will, Gregory had said. We file it with the court, notify all beneficiaries, and begin the process of distributing the estate according to your father's wishes. Patricia thinks she already inherited everything. Yes, which is concerning. Someone gave her a fraudulent will, presumably to manipulate the family before the real will was revealed. I don't know who or why, but it's potentially criminal. What do I do? Nothing yet. Let me handle the legal filings. I'll notify Patricia and her sons officially that I'm the actual executor and that there will be a formal reading of the will. They'll learn the truth then. They're going to be furious. Yes, they'll probably contest the will, but Miss Ashford, your father was very thorough. He had a psychiatric evaluation completed to prove his mental competency. He had 3 witnesses. He included detailed explanations for his decisions. He even had video testimony recorded. The will is as close to unbreakable as a will can be. Video testimony? Yes. He wanted to make it absolutely clear that this was his choice, made while of sound mind, without coercion. He recorded himself explaining his reasoning, discussing his relationship with you and with Patricia, making it clear that he understood exactly what he was doing. Can I see it? After the reading, he wanted Patricia and her sons to see it first. He wanted them to hear, in his own words, why he made these choices. I'd sat with that for a moment. Dad had prepared for this, had anticipated Patricia's reaction, had tried to protect me even after death. When is the reading? I've scheduled it for Monday, 10 a.m. at my office, 4 days from now. Patricia, her sons, you, and Emily's appointed guardian. Everyone needs to be present. Gregory, I need you to understand something. Patricia has spent 15 years making my life hell. She's manipulated my father, excluded me from the family, made me feel worthless, and her sons have followed her lead. They've treated me like trash my entire life. Those texts they sent me, that's who they are. I understand. So when they find out about this will, they're not going to accept it gracefully. They're going to fight. They're going to make this ugly. Are you prepared for that? Gregory had smiled, and for the first time, I'd seen something fierce in his expression. Miss Ashford, your father hired me specifically because I don't lose. I've been practicing estate law for 35 years. I've dealt with far worse than Patricia Ashford, and I made your father a promise that his wishes would be honored. So yes, I'm prepared. Good, because I want to be there when you tell them. I want to see their faces. I thought you might. I'll make sure you're present. And Gregory, those texts they sent me, the mocking ones, save them. They might be useful in showing their character if this goes to court. Already done. Forward them to me immediately. The 4 days until the reading were the longest of my life. I'd gone to work, done my job, interacted with colleagues, all while feeling like I was living in a parallel universe where reality had split in 2. In one reality, I was broke, grieving, excluded from my father's legacy. In the other, I was about to inherit $11.5 million. I'd told no one. Not my friends, not my coworkers, not even my therapist. The secret had burned in my chest like a coal, hot and dangerous and impossible to extinguish. I'd received more texts from the Stepbrothers, more gloating, more cruel jokes. Tyler, maybe we'll buy you dinner sometime, feeling charitable. Mason, you should come visit the new house I'm buying, see what real success looks like. Blake, guess Dad finally made it clear who the real family was. Sorry, not sorry. I'd saved every text, every screenshot, every piece of evidence of their celebration at my expense. On Sunday night, I'd barely slept. I'd lain awake imagining the reading, imagining Patricia's face, the brothers' shock, the moment they realized they'd celebrated too soon. I'd thought about Dad's letter, about his apologies and his shame, about whether I could forgive him. The truth was complicated. Yes, he'd failed me. Yes, he'd chosen Patricia over me repeatedly. Yes, he'd let his wife abuse his daughter for years, but he'd also known, had been ashamed, had tried, in the end, to make it right. It wasn't enough. Nothing could be enough, but it was something. And more than that, he'd loved me. Despite his weakness, despite his failures, despite Patricia's influence, he'd loved me. And he'd made sure that love was reflected where it could be, in his will. On Monday morning, I'd dressed carefully, professional black suit, conservative jewelry, hair pulled back. I'd wanted to look capable, put together, unshakable. I'd arrived at Gregory's office at 9:45 a.m. The building was downtown, all glass and steel and expensive lawyers. Gregory had greeted me personally. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." They're in the conference room. Patricia, Tyler, Mason, and Blake. Emily's guardian is there as well, Patricia's sister, Margaret. They're already unhappy about being called in for another reading. "Do they know I'm here?" "Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first." He'd guided me to his private office. "Before we go in, I need to prepare you. Patricia is, confident. She believes she's already inherited. She's furious that I've called this meeting. She's been calling me a hack lawyer and threatening to report me to the Bar Association for wasting her time." "Good. I want her confident. Makes the fall harder." "You're sure you want to be there when I tell them?" "Gregory, I've waited 15 years for Patricia to face consequences for how she's treated me. I've waited 15 years for my father to choose me over her. I wouldn't miss this for anything." "Then let's go." The conference room was large, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A long mahogany table dominated the center. Patricia sat at one end, Tyler, Mason, and Blake ranged around her. A woman I recognized as Patricia's sister Margaret sat beside her. They all looked up when I walked in behind Gregory. "What is she doing here?" Patricia had demanded immediately. "Cassandra is a beneficiary," Gregory had said calmly. "She has every right to be present." "A beneficiary? Of what? Richard left her nothing." "We'll get to that. Please, everyone, sit." I'd taken a seat at the opposite end of the table from Patricia. The physical distance felt appropriate. Opposite ends of the table, opposite ends of everything. Tyler had been smirking at me. Mason had been typing on his phone. Blake had been staring out the window, clearly bored. Gregory had taken the head of the table, opening his briefcase and pulling out multiple copies of the will. "Thank you all for coming," he'd begun formally. "I am Gregory Walsh, senior partner at Morrison Walsh and Chen, and the named executor of Richard Ashford's will. We're here today for the official reading and distribution of his estate." "We already did this," Patricia had interrupted. "The executor, Collins was it, already came to my house. We already handled everything." "Mrs. Ashford, I am the executor. I have been since your husband executed this will 6 months ago. If someone claiming to be the executor visited you, they were impersonating an officer of the court, which is a felony." The room had gone very quiet. "What are you talking about?" Tyler had asked, his smirk fading. "I'm talking about the fact that someone presented you with a fraudulent will, someone who was not authorized to act on behalf of this estate, and I need to understand what happened. What did this person tell you?" Patricia had looked uncertain for the first time. He said Richard's estate was worth approximately $12 million, that it would be distributed among the family, that I would inherit the house and assets, that Tyler, Mason, and Blake would split the remaining estate. "And Cassandra?" He said Richard had left her nothing, said it was Richard's choice, that he'd moved on from his first marriage. "And you believed this?" "Why wouldn't we?" Mason had snapped. It made sense. Dad barely talked to her anymore. She hadn't been around in years. Of course, he'd leave everything to his real family. "His real family," Gregory had repeated, his voice very cold. "I see. And did any of you question this? Ask to see documentation? Request identification from this supposed executor?" Silence. "No," Patricia had finally said. "We were grieving. We trusted what we were told." "You were celebrating," I'd said quietly. Everyone had turned to look at me. "You were celebrating. You sent me text messages bragging about your inheritance. With laughing emojis. You mocked me for being excluded. You thanked me for making it simple by staying away. That doesn't sound like grieving." Tyler had flushed red. Mason had looked away. Blake had had the grace to look embarrassed. "We were processing in our own way," Patricia had said stiffly. "Cassandra, you've always been dramatic about feeling excluded. This isn't about you." "Actually," Gregory had said, "this is precisely about her, because Richard Ashford's actual will, the one I'm about to read to you, tells a very different story than the fraudulent one you were presented with. He'd distributed copies of the will to everyone at the table. The estate is worth $12.3 million, Gregory had begun. The house jointly owned with Patricia transfers to her automatically. Emily's trust fund is $300,000 to be managed by her appointed guardian until she turns 25, and the remaining $12 million in assets is distributed as follows." He'd paused, looking at each person at the table. "To Tyler Ashford, $166,000. To Mason Ashford, $166,000. To Blake Ashford, $166,000. The brothers had looked confused. That's not $4 million each? No, it's not. The remaining $11.5 million goes to Cassandra Elizabeth Ashford. Silence. Complete, utter silence. Then? That's not possible, Patricia had whispered. It's not only possible, it's legally binding. Your husband executed this will 6 months ago, with 3 witnesses, with a psychiatric evaluation confirming his mental competence, and with video testimony explaining his reasoning. This is his will. This is his choice. No. Patricia had stood up, her face flushed. No. Richard would never. He wouldn't do this. She means nothing to him. Mrs. Ashford, please sit down. I will not. This is fraud. This is manipulation. She must have tricked him, influenced him somehow. I haven't spoken to my father in over 2 years, I'd said calmly. I had no idea this will existed until 3 days ago. I couldn't have influenced something I didn't know about. You're lying. You must have gotten to him somehow. Your husband came to me, Gregory had said firmly. He initiated this. He explained that he wanted to correct years of inequity in how he'd treated his daughter. He was very clear about his wishes and very adamant that they be honored. This is bullshit, Tyler had exploded, standing up. $166,000? That's nothing. We were supposed to split $12 million. You were never supposed to split $12 million, Gregory had corrected. That was a fraudulent will created by someone who wanted to manipulate you. This is your father's actual final wishes. He's your stepfather, I'd said to Tyler. Not your father. Richard Ashford was my father. You were his wife's children that he took responsibility for. There's a difference. Shut up, Blake had shouted. You don't get to talk. You abandoned him. I left because Patricia made it clear I wasn't wanted, because Dad never stood up for me, because being in this family meant being treated like I didn't matter, and apparently Dad finally understood that. There's more, Gregory had said. Richard recorded video testimony explaining his decisions. He wanted you all to hear it from him. Would you like me to play it? No. Patricia had started, but Tyler had cut her off. Play it. I want to hear what Dad supposedly said. Gregory had pulled out a laptop, set it on the table, and pressed play. My father's face had appeared on screen. He'd been sitting in Gregory's office, the same office we were in now. He'd looked tired, older than I remembered, but his voice had been clear and steady. My name is Richard Michael Ashford. I'm 66 years old, of sound mind, and I'm recording this testimony to accompany my will, executed on March 15th, 2024. I want to explain my decision so there's no confusion about my intentions. To Patricia, you've been my wife for 22 years. I provided for you and your sons. I gave you a comfortable life, a beautiful home, and financial security. But I also gave you something you had no right to, my daughter. I let you push her out of our family. I let you treat her as less than your sons. I let you make her feel unwanted and unloved in her own father's house. That was my failure, not hers. You tried to erase her. You tried to make it so my first marriage, my first wife, my first daughter didn't matter. And I let you. For that, I'm deeply ashamed. So no, Patricia, you don't get my estate. You get the house we bought together. That's enough. To Tyler, Mason, and Blake, I raised you. I paid for your education, your activities, your lives. I treated you well, but you're not my children. You're Patricia's children, who became my responsibility when I married your mother, and I fulfilled that responsibility. I gave you opportunities, stability, and advantages. The money I'm leaving you is more than generous, considering you've already received hundreds of thousands of dollars in educational expenses and support. To Cassandra, I failed you. After your mother died, you needed me to be strong, to be present, to protect you. Instead, I brought Patricia into our lives and let her push you out. I let her sons take priority over you. I paid for their education while you took on debt. I gave them everything and you nothing. I justified it to myself. Told myself you were older, more independent, that you'd understand. But the truth is, I was weak. I was afraid of conflict with Patricia. I was desperate to maintain the illusion of a happy family. And you paid the price. This will is my attempt to correct that. It's inadequate. Nothing can give you back the years we lost, the relationship we damaged, the father you deserve to have. But it's what I can give you now. Take this money, Cassie girl. Build the life you deserve. Never wonder if you can afford something again. And know that in this one thing, finally, I put you first. I love you. I always did, even when I was too weak to show it. You were the best part of my life. You deserved a better father. I'm sorry you got me. The video had ended. Patricia had been crying, angry tears, not sad ones. The boys had looked shell-shocked. That's his explanation, Gregory had said quietly. That's why he made these choices. And this video, along with the psychiatric evaluation and witness statements, makes this will virtually uncontestable. We'll contest it anyway, Patricia had shrieked. I'll fight this. I'll drag this through court for years. You can try, Gregory had said. But Mrs. Ashford, I should warn you. Richard anticipated your reaction. If you contest this will and lose, there's a clause that reduces your 3 sons' inheritances to $50,000 each. The rest goes to charity. He wanted to discourage frivolous legal challenges. That had stopped her. She'd looked at Tyler, at Mason, at Blake, calculating. This is unbelievable, Mason had said numbly. He really did this. He really cut us out for her. He didn't cut you out, I'd said. He gave you what was fair. You got your education paid for. Tyler's undergrad at $60,000 a year, your law school, Blake's master's. You got cars, travel, everything you wanted growing up. You got your grandfather's love and attention and resources. You got everything while I got debt and exclusion and the knowledge that I wasn't really part of the family. This will is just balancing the scales. Balancing the scales? Tyler had laughed bitterly. You're getting $11.5 million and we're getting $166,000 each. That's not balance. That's revenge. No, I'd said. Revenge would be leaving you nothing. This is Dad acknowledging that while you're not his biological children, he did have a responsibility to you that he fulfilled. You're getting something. I'm getting what I should have gotten all along, recognition that I'm his daughter and that should have mattered. They'd left the office in a storm of anger and threats, Patricia promising lawsuits, Tyler shouting about fraud, Mason and Blake silent and shell-shocked. Margaret, Patricia's sister, had lingered behind. Cassandra, she'd said quietly, I need to apologize to you. I'd looked at her, surprised. For what? For not speaking up. I saw how Patricia treated you over the years. I saw the favoritism, the exclusion, the cruelty, and I said nothing because she's my sister and I didn't want to cause family conflict. But I should have said something. I should have stood up for you. Thank you, I'd said, meaning it. That means more than you might think. Richard was a good man who made bad choices, but this, she'd gestured at the will, this is a good choice. Maybe his first truly good choice regarding you in many years. Don't let Patricia make you feel guilty about it. After everyone had left, Gregory and I had sat in his office, processing what had just happened. They'll contest it, I'd said. Probably, but they won't win. Your father made this will bulletproof. How long will this take? Probate typically takes 6 to 9 months. If they contest it, maybe a year. But Ms. Ashford, the outcome isn't in doubt. This will is solid. You will inherit what your father left you. I'd sat with that, trying to understand what it meant. $11.5 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having. Enough to never worry about bills, student loans, rent, anything ever again. What do I do now? I'd asked. You go live your life, Gregory had said. You let me handle Patricia and her legal challenges. You let the courts do their job, and you start thinking about what you want to do with your inheritance. I want to pay off my student loans, I'd said immediately. All $57,000 of them. That's first. Good. What else? I want to buy a house. Nothing huge, just something that's mine. Somewhere I can live and build a life without worrying about landlords or rent increases. Very reasonable. And I want to set up a scholarship for students who are estranged from their families, who are going to college without parental support. I want to help people who are going through what I went through. Gregory had smiled. Your father would have loved that. Would he? Or would he have been ashamed that it was necessary? Both, I think, which is probably appropriate. The legal battle had been exactly as ugly as predicted. Patricia had contested the will immediately, filing her challenge within days of the reading. She'd hired Gordon and Associates, one of the most expensive estate litigation firms in the state. Her lawyer, Thomas Gordon himself, was known for aggressive tactics and grinding down opponents through sheer attrition. They'd claimed Richard had been mentally incompetent. They'd claimed undue influence. They'd claimed fraud, forgery, and that I'd somehow manipulated Dad during his final months despite having no contact with him. They'd demanded psychiatric evaluations of Dad's mental state, but Gregory had already had those. 3 separate evaluations from independent psychiatrists, all confirming Dad was of sound mind. They'd demanded proof of the witness's credibility, but Gregory had statements from Dad's doctor, his business partner of 20 years, and his accountant. All of them confirming they'd witnessed the will signing and that Dad had been clear about his intentions. They'd tried to get the video testimony excluded, but the judge had ruled it admissible. Dad's words, in his own voice, explaining his decisions, had been too powerful to dismiss. Patricia had given interviews to local news stations. "Greedy daughter steals stepfather's fortune," one headline had read. She'd cried on camera, talking about how I'd estranged myself from the family, and then swooped in to take everything after Dad died. She'd conveniently left out the 15 years of exclusion, favoritism, and cruelty. Left out the college funds she'd insured for her sons while I'd taken on debt. Left out the Christmas cards without me, the prom dresses she'd refused to help with, the birthday parties I'd never gotten. I'd wanted to respond, to tell my side. Gregory had advised against it. "Don't engage," he'd said. "Don't feed the narrative. The court will see through her story. The evidence speaks for itself." He'd been right. The more Patricia talked, the more holes appeared in her version of events. Reporters had started digging. They'd found the Christmas cards, years of them, with me conspicuously absent. They'd interviewed my old neighbors who remembered the daughter who was never quite part of the family. They'd uncovered the college fund disparity through financial records Patricia had been forced to produce during discovery. The narrative had started to shift. Excluded daughter finally recognized in father's will, one article had been titled, "Stepmother's Years of Favoritism Exposed in a State Battle," another had said. Tyler, Mason, and Blake had been deposed. Under oath, they'd had to answer questions about their treatment of me, the texts they'd sent, their assumptions about the inheritance. "Did you send Cassandra Ashford a text message on September 18th that included laughing emojis and mocked her exclusion from the estate?" Patricia's lawyer had asked Tyler during his deposition, trying to establish that I'd been rightfully excluded. "Yes," Tyler had admitted. "And what was the nature of your relationship with Ms. Ashford over the years?" We weren't close." "Can you elaborate?" "She wasn't really part of the family. She was older, from Dad's first marriage. We had our own family with Mom." "So you didn't consider her family?" "Not really, no." That deposition transcript had been devastating for Patricia's case. Her own son, under oath, admitting they'd never considered me family. It had undermined her entire argument that Dad's will was somehow unfair or unexpected. Mason's deposition had been worse. He'd been arrogant, dismissive. "Ms. Ashford paid for her own college while your father paid for yours, correct?" "Yes, but that's because she was older. The money situation was different then. Your father's estate was worth approximately $8 million when Ms. Ashford was college age. Would you say that was insufficient to pay for her education?" Silence. "Mr. Ashford? I don't know. I wasn't involved in those decisions. But you benefited from those decisions, didn't you? You received a free education while she took on $85,000 in debt? That wasn't my fault." "I'm not suggesting it was your fault. I'm asking if you benefited from the preferential treatment." "I guess so." Blake's deposition had actually shown some conscience. He'd admitted that I'd been treated differently, that Patricia had favored them, that the texts had been cruel. "Do you regret sending that text to Ms. Ashford?" Gregory had asked him. "Yes," Blake had said quietly. "It was mean. She didn't deserve that." "Why did you send it?" Because Mom said Cassie had chosen to leave the family, that she'd abandoned Dad, that we didn't owe her anything. I believed that. I didn't question it. And now I think maybe we should have questioned it." That deposition had actually helped me. Blake's admission that Patricia had shaped their perception of me, that they'd been told I'd abandoned the family rather than been pushed out, it had supported Dad's claims in his letter and video. The trial itself had lasted 3 days. Patricia's lawyers had presented their case. Dad had been manipulated, the will was suspicious, I'd unduly influenced him somehow. But they'd had no evidence. No proof of contact between Dad and me during the time the will was drafted. No indication of manipulation or coercion. Nothing except their insistence that the will was unfair and therefore must be fraudulent. Gregory had methodically destroyed their case. He'd presented the psychiatric evaluations, the witness statements, the video testimony, my documentation of Patricia's treatment, years of texts, emails, Facebook posts that showed the exclusion and favoritism. He'd shown the Christmas cards without me, the college fund disparity, the graduation gift gap. Everything that proved Dad's will wasn't vindictive or crazy. It was an attempt to correct years of inequity. The judge had deliberated for 2 weeks, then issued her ruling. The will is valid. Richard Ashford was of sound mind, acted of his own free will, and had legitimate reasons for distributing his estate as he did. The evidence shows a long pattern of disparate treatment between his biological daughter and his stepchildren, which provides clear motivation for his testamentary choices. Patricia Ashford's contest is without merit and is hereby dismissed. Furthermore, pursuant to the will's contest clause, The bequests to Tyler, Mason, and Blake Ashford are reduced from $166,000 each to $50,000 each, with the remainder going to charity as specified. I'd sat in the courtroom and heard that ruling and felt something break loose in my chest. 15 years of being told I didn't matter, of being pushed aside, of being treated as less than. And a judge had just said, officially, legally, that I'd been right, that the treatment had been real and wrong and unacceptable. Patricia had walked out of the courtroom without looking at me. Her sons had followed, shell-shocked. The money had transferred to my accounts 2 weeks later. $11.5 million minus estate taxes, legal fees, and the charitable distribution from the reduced step-siblings' bequests. I'd ended up with just over $9 million after everything was settled. The first thing I'd done, before buying anything, before celebrating, before anything else, I'd paid off my student loans, all $57,000 of them, in one transaction. I'd sat at my computer, staring at the confirmation screen. Paid in full. 2 words that meant I was free from the debt I'd carried for 10 years because Dad had chosen to pay for Tyler's education instead of mine. Then I'd cried, deep, wrenching sobs of relief and rage and grief all mixed together. Because yes, the debt was gone. But it never should have existed in the first place. I'd bought a small house in a good neighborhood, 3 bedrooms, a yard, everything I'd ever wanted. I'd paid cash, $385,000. It was mine, completely and totally. I'd set up the scholarship fund at my alma mater, $500,000 endowment to provide $20,000 yearly scholarships to students estranged from their families. The first 2 recipients had been selected last month. Both of them had cried when they had been told they wouldn't have to take on debt. I'd invested the rest conservatively, index funds, bonds, a balanced portfolio that would generate enough income that I'd never have to worry about money again. I'd also quit my job and started freelancing, taking only projects I was passionate about, working when I wanted to, living life on my own terms. But the best part, the absolute best part of all of this? I'd gotten a new phone number, moved to my new house, cut all contact with Patricia and her sons, and sent them one final text from my old number before I disconnected it. Thanks for the laughing emojis. They really helped me understand who you are. Enjoy your $50,000 each. I hear it goes fast. Then I'd blocked them all and moved on with my life. It's been a year since Dad died. A year since Gregory Walsh knocked on my door and changed my life forever. I'm sitting on my back patio, drinking coffee from an expensive French press I bought without checking the price tag, watching the morning sun light up my garden. My house is beautiful, not huge, not ostentatious, but perfectly mine. Every piece of furniture chosen carefully, every decoration meaningful, every space designed for comfort and peace. The house itself is a 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood. 1,800 square feet. Hardwood floors, a kitchen with marble counters, a backyard with raised garden beds where I grow vegetables and flowers, a studio room where I do my graphic design work on a top-of-the-line setup I'd never have been able to afford before. I'd paid $385,000 cash for it. The realtor's eyes had widened when I'd said I didn't need financing. Cash offer? That'll definitely make your offer more competitive. When can I move in? After inspections and closing, probably 4 weeks. I'd moved in 3.5 weeks later. The first night, I'd walked through every room, touching the walls, the door frames, the counters, whispering to myself, "This is mine. This is actually mine." No landlord could evict me. No rent could increase. No one could take this from me. It was mine, completely and legally and permanently. I think about Dad sometimes. More than sometimes, really. The grief comes in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes crushing. I'll be cooking dinner and remember something he used to say. I'll see a news story about commercial real estate and think about calling him before remembering I can't. I've forgiven him mostly. Not because he deserved it. Forgiveness isn't about deserving. Because carrying that anger was exhausting, and I was tired of letting Patricia and the past control my emotional state. He failed me. He was weak when he should have been strong. He chose comfort over courage, repeatedly, for 15 years. He let Patricia push me out of our family. He participated in my exclusion through his silence and inaction. But he saw it. Eventually, he saw what he'd done. He felt shame for it. He took steps to correct it, even if those steps were inadequate and came too late. And in his final moments, he tried to tell me about the real Will, about Gregory Walsh, about the truth. Will, executor, Gregory Walsh. He has it. The real one. Those had been some of his last coherent words to me, making sure I knew, making sure I'd find Gregory, making sure the real Will would be honored. It wasn't enough. It will never be enough. But it's something. I think about Patricia occasionally, too. About the shock on her face when Gregory had read the actual will. About the rage, the accusations, the desperate 6-month legal battle that had cost her hundreds of thousands in legal fees and gotten her nothing. I'd heard through a mutual acquaintance, a friend of Emily's who I'd stayed in touch with, that Patricia had had to sell the house Dad bought her. Apparently, without Dad's income and with only the $50,000 the boys got after their reduced inheritance, she couldn't afford the $8,000 monthly property taxes and maintenance on the 5-bedroom house in the expensive neighborhood. She'd moved to a townhouse, 2 bedrooms, in a regular neighborhood, the kind of place she would have looked down on before. Tyler had had to get a regular job. Not the network my way into an executive position track he'd been expecting with his MBA and his trust fund. He'd had to actually apply for jobs, interview, start at entry level. The trust fund life he'd been planning had evaporated, and suddenly he'd had to work like everyone else. Mason had graduated from law school, but had to take a job at a small firm rather than the prestigious corporate practice he'd been aiming for. He couldn't afford to take an unpaid internship at a big firm while living off family money. He had to take the paying job, the one at the strip mall firm handling divorces and DUIs. Blake had been working as an engineer, doing fine, actually. Of the 3 brothers, he seemed to have adjusted best. He'd reached out to me 6 months ago. "Cassandra, it's Blake. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But I wanted to apologize. Really apologize. Not just the legal deposition stuff. We treated you horribly. I treated you horribly. And I'm sorry. You didn't deserve any of it." I'd stared at that message for a long time before responding. "Thank you. That means something. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know that some of us learned. Some of us grew up. Tyler and Mason are still bitter, still think you stole something from them. But I understand now. We stole from you first, for years. Dad was just trying to balance the scales. We'd exchanged a few more messages. Nothing deep, nothing that rebuilt a relationship, but acknowledgement, understanding, growth. I don't feel guilty about the inheritance anymore. I used to lie awake at night, examining my conscience, questioning whether I was wrong to take so much while they got so little. But then I'd think about Tyler's fully funded Harvard MBA while I'd worked 2 jobs through college. About Mason's law school tuition paid in full while I'd still been paying off undergraduate loans at 30. About Blake's master's degree, Emily's trust fund, the European vacation Patricia and the boys had taken the year I'd been eating ramen to make ends meet. They'd gotten years of financial support, years of advantages, years of being the priority while I'd been the afterthought. This will wasn't punishment. It was rebalancing. It was recognition. It was Dad finally acknowledging that blood matters, that biological children aren't interchangeable with stepchildren, that I should have been the priority all along. The Scholarship Fund. The Scholarship Fund has become my favorite part of this whole experience. I'd set it up 6 months ago with a $500,000 endowment, the Jennifer and Cassandra Ashford Scholarship for Estranged Students, named for my mother and for me, for the family Dad had before Patricia tried to erase it. The scholarship provides $20,000 per year to 2 students who are estranged from their families and pursuing higher education without parental support. The criteria are specific. Must be estranged from biological family, not just living separately, but actually estranged. Must be pursuing a bachelor's degree, must demonstrate financial need, must have a minimum 3.0 GPA. The first 2 recipients had been selected in January, Melissa Chen and David Rodriguez. Melissa's story had broken my heart. She'd come out as lesbian at 17. Her religious parents had kicked her out, telling her she was choosing sin over family. She'd been living with friends, working full-time while taking community college classes, trying to save enough to transfer to a 4-year school. The scholarship meant she could quit her full-time job, transfer to the university, and focus on her education. She'd written me a letter. "Dear Ms. Ashford, I don't know how to thank you. I've been carrying this weight, student loans, work exhaustion, the fear of not being able to finish school, for 3 years. Your scholarship doesn't just give me money, it gives me hope. It tells me that someone understands what it's like to be excluded from your own family, that someone cares whether I succeed. My parents told me I was choosing wrong. They said I was throwing away my family. But I didn't choose to be gay. I just chose to be honest about it. And they chose to reject me for that honesty. Your scholarship tells me that my education matters even if my parents don't think so. That I deserve support even if they won't provide it. That I'm worth investing in. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for turning your pain into something that helps people like me." With gratitude, Melissa, I'd cried reading that letter. Had seen myself in every word. The exclusion, the rejection, the determination to succeed despite it all, the exhausting weight of trying to build a life without family support. David's story had been different, but equally painful. His parents had been addicts who'd cycled through rehab and relapse his entire childhood. At 16, he'd reported them to CPS after his younger sister had been left alone for 3 days while they'd disappeared on a binge. His parents had never forgiven him for that report, even though it had probably saved his sister's life. They'd told everyone who'd listened that David had betrayed the family and torn them apart. They'd refused to provide any information for his FAFSA, making it nearly impossible for him to get financial aid. Ms. Ashford, I've spent 6 years believing I did the right thing by protecting my sister, while being told by everyone who matters that I destroyed my family. Your scholarship doesn't just help me pay for school. It validates that sometimes choosing yourself over toxic family is the right thing to do. My parents say I'm selfish. They say I chose my own future over family loyalty. But they chose drugs over their children every single day. Why is their choice acceptable while mine is betrayal? Your scholarship says that my choice was valid, that protecting myself was reasonable, that I deserve support even though my parents won't give it. Thank you for understanding what it means to be excluded. Thank you for using your resources to help people like me. Thank you for making me feel less alone. David. These letters had made every moment of the legal battle worth it. Every angry accusation from Patricia, every cruel headline, every exhausting deposition, all of it was worth it if it meant Melissa and David could finish their education debt-free. This year, I'd increased the scholarship to 4 recipients. The application had opened last month, and I'd already received 37 applications. 37 students who'd been rejected by their families but were determined to build their lives anyway. Reading their stories had been like reading my own story over and over, in different variations. Parents who'd chosen religion over children, parents who'd chosen new spouses over biological kids, parents who'd chosen addiction or abuse or simply indifference over their children's well-being. Patricia said I'd never be part of the family. She was right, in a way. I was never part of her family. Her family was built on exclusion and favoritism and cruelty masked as love. But I was always part of Dad's family, his real family, the one that included Jennifer and me and the life we'd had before Patricia arrived. And in the end, Dad remembered that. In the end, he chose me. 15 years too late. But he chose me. And that's something Patricia and her sons will never be able to take away.